I've been making YouTube videos for a little over a year now, and something I bet you've been able to pick up on at this point is that I'm a pretty big Sonic fan. And one of the symptoms of that is that I play a lot of Sonic games. One of the Sonic games I've been playing a lot recently is Sonic Unleashed, mainly due to the release of Unleashed Recompiled a few months back. And it was while blasting through the daytime stages that I made a pretty big observation about not just Unleashed, but the Sonic franchise as a whole. You know, Sega's changed the Lightspeed Dash a lot over the years. This is something that's been on my mind 24/7 for nearly 3 months now. I need to get a job. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the Lightspeed Dash was introduced in the original Sonic Adventure. It is a move that, when activated, allows Sonic to effortlessly glide across a trail of rings and sometimes other objects such as enemies. Like a lot of stuff introduced in Sonic Adventure, the Lightspeed Dash would go on to be a series staple, appearing as part of Sonic's moveset in almost every mainline 3D Sonic game. But despite how consistently it appears, it's also just as consistently changed with every game it's ever been in. Some minor, some massive. I took a look at every Sonic game with the Lightspeed Dash, and there are only 2 where it stays the exact same between entries, no changes made. And to my surprise, nobody really talks about that. Sure, it's a very small aspect of a game to get hung up on, but these are Sonic fans we're talking about. They lose their minds when his quills are 0.2 inches shorter than they were in the last game. So today, I wanted to talk about the Lightspeed Dash, every appearance it's had, what's changed with each one, and if the changes were an evolution of the move, or a regression. So without further ado, here is the surprisingly comprehensive history of the Lightspeed Dash. Starting with... Here we go, the game that started it all. Unlike the Spin Dash or Homing Attack, the Lightspeed Dash isn't a part of Sonic's base moveset in Sonic Adventure, instead being an upgrade the player unlocks by progressing through his story. After the player finishes Windy Valley, the second level in his campaign, they unlock the ability to travel inside of Station Square's sewers, where they can find a pair of Lightspeed shoes, giving him the ability to perform the Lightspeed Dash. It's important they get these shoes too, as they're required to unlock the next stage in Sonic's campaign, Casinopolis. From then on out, the Lightspeed Dash is used very sparingly throughout the rest of Sonic's story. There are only a handful of times where it's required in the entire game, and it's very easy to see why. In order to perform the Lightspeed Dash, the player has to hold the action button to begin charging a Spin Dash. And after long enough, Sonic will exit the Spin Dash surrounded by this glowing blue aura, which upon letting go of the action button, allows him to perform the Lightspeed Dash. There is an optional bracelet upgrade Sonic can unlock that speeds up the charging process, but even then, it still takes a moment for the Lightspeed Dash to charge. I get why they had to do this. If they made the charge up time too short, it would be really annoying to players who just wanted to use the Spin Dash. But in that case, why not just map it to a separate button? It might sound like I'm nitpicking, and to an extent I can agree with you on that. It's not that bad in the moment, but in a game like Sonic, which is a fast-paced platformer where you need to go from point A to point B as quickly as possible, having one of Sonic's mandatory abilities require you to stop dead in your tracks to do is a bit of a problem. I do think that the charge up is justified for the Lightspeed attack, a move Sonic unlocks much later in his story. It's very similar to the Lightspeed Dash, although instead of gliding through a trail of rings, Sonic will instead circle around any nearby enemies and destroy them. It's only used once in the entire game to unlock the entrance to Red Mountain. It's basically optional, so having it charge up to be used doesn't really bother me. Overall, while the Lightspeed Dash in Sonic Adventure is a neat idea, it's ultimately not very fun or useful outside of the sections where the game comes to a screeching halt to force you to use it. Thankfully, Sonic Team must have been aware of this, because the Lightspeed Dash would receive a complete overhaul for the next game it was featured in. I'm, of course, talking about Okay, I just found this out while writing the script, but according to the Sonic Wiki, the Lightspeed Dash does appear in Sonic Shuffle, but under a brand new name. The Lightspeed Spin Dash, and can only be used by Supersonic. So, if Supersonic draws the same number from his deck of cards twice in a row, it allows him to combine the amount of those two cards together and travel that many spaces. It has absolutely nothing to do with any other version of the Lightspeed Dash, but since it technically is one, I had to cover it here. Okay, now we can move on to SA2. Like I was saying before I went on that little tangent there, the Lightspeed Dash was completely reworked for Sonic Adventure 2. Something that would end up paying off on Sonic Team's end, as pretty much every future appearance of the Lightspeed Dash is based on this version of it. Once again, it's not a part of Sonic and now Shadow's base moveset and is instead an upgrade they unlock. Although here, it's found inside of their levels since this game doesn't have the adventure fields the first did. Both Hedgehogs unlock the Lightspeed Dash in their respective second levels, Sonic's Metal Harbor and Shadow's White Jungle. Both characters get stuck at a point in their levels where they need to use the Light Dash to progress, and by looking around the area, they can find the upgrade to unlock it and can now progress through the level as normal. It works the exact same way as it did before. You activate it and glide through a trail of rings, but instead of charging it up, the player can now press the action button to instantly glide across a trail of rings. It sounds like a small change at first, but being able to do the Lightspeed Dash on the fly opens up so many brand new possibilities for the player and the game designers. Not only can it be used way more often in the level design for things like shortcuts or platforming challenges, but the player can also use it to quickly get some rings or a speed boost. It's just way more versatile now that you don't need to spend a couple of moments charging it. The only real problem I have with the Lightspeed Dash in this game is that it's still mapped to the same button as the Spin Dash. I have no idea why, but pretty much every 3D Sonic game from this time was obsessed with making any action that wasn't jump be mapped to the action button. It's not as much of an issue as some people make it out to be, at least in Sonic and Shadow stages. Hold the action button, you do a Spin Dash. Tap it, you do a somersault. And press it near some rings or a little temple, and you perform either the Lightspeed Dash or your Mystic Melody. However, I will admit that there were a handful of times where I wanted to do the Lightspeed Dash, but since I wasn't the exact distance from a ring the game wanted me to be, I would end up doing a somersault instead. It's not a deal breaker, just a small pet peeve I have about the Light Dash in this game and SA2 as a whole. The Lightspeed attack also returns in this game as a now completely optional upgrade for Sonic and Shadow, and I'm sorry to say this, but it has sadly been nerfed from SA1. The Lightspeed attack hasn't received any sort of massive upgrade. It functions the exact same way as the last game, but is very inconsistent in how effective it is against enemies. There are some times where it works flawlessly, no notes. But there are just as many, if not more times, where instead of attacking an enemy, it just circles around them, and you need to flick the analog stick in order to do anything to them. Still though, it isn't a total deal breaker. I got a lot of use out of the Lightspeed attack, mainly when dealing with the game's more annoying enemies, such as the Artificial Chaos. Overall, while I do have some small nitpicks about the move in this game, the Lightspeed Dash in Sonic Adventure 2 is a massive step up from its predecessor, and I can only hope it gets better in the future. I'm going to be combining Heroes and Shadow 05 into one segment since they run on the same engine and as a result have the exact same Lightspeed Dash. The changes made to the Light Dash from SA2 to Heroes aren't nearly as big as they were going from SA1 to SA2. It's activated by pressing the action button near a trail of rings and can still only be used by Sonic and Shadow. I guess we can add that to the list. Rather, it's everything surrounding the Lightspeed Dash that's changed. Instead of being unlocked through an upgrade, the Lightspeed Dash is now a part of Sonic and Shadow's movesets from the beginning of the game. Most likely because an upgrade system similar to the adventure games wouldn't really work in Heroes and 05. The Lightspeed attack is also gone now. either because you can't spin dash in Heroes, or because... I mean, it was completely optional in the last game. I don't think they were going to keep it around. That's really all that's changed about the light dash in these two games. Nothing that massive. Although I will say that the one button problem from SA2 is almost non-existent. None of the speed characters in Heroes can do the spin dash or somersault from the last game, being replaced with a move called a Rocket Excel that takes a couple of seconds to charge up, making the Lightspeed Dash way more responsive, something that carries over to Shadow the Hedgehog because... who uses the spin dash in Shadow the Hedgehog? I'm genuinely curious. Overall, while very similar to its predecessor, the Lightspeed Dash in both Heroes and Shadow 05 is still very fun to use, and the small changes it does have only help make it better. Sonic Team seems to be going on a winning streak with the Light Dash. Let's see if it keeps getting better. What's the next game we need to take a look at? Oh. Since we don't have the team mechanics of Heroes or the branching story paths of Shadow the Hedgehog, the Lightspeed Dash is back to being an upgrade for Sonic and Shadow. Not Silver though. I guess we can add that to the list. Sonic gets his pretty early on, before his first level actually, so it's basically a part of his base moveset, but Shadow gets it a little bit later, needing to unlock it in order to access his version of Kingdom Valley. Despite that though, Shadow's story never really uses the Light Dash again outside of a couple small sections in Flame Core. It's mostly used by Sonic. But I really wish it wasn't. This is easily the worst version of the Lightspeed Dash so far. Say whatever you want about the Lightspeed Dash in SA1, but at least it functioned properly. Here, it either doesn't respond, even when I'm right there, or is painfully slow due to Sonic 06 and its, to not beat a dead horse, lack of polish. However, that's strictly talking about the normal platforming sections of Sonic stages, because I think that when it comes to the Mach Speed sections, it's utilized pretty well. There are plenty straight lines of rings scattered across these parts of Sonic stages and help the player go down a fixed path while also increasing their speed. But as the player keeps doing it more and more, they'll find that it becomes way harder to control Sonic at such a high speed, not helped by the stiff controls of 06's Mach Speed sections, meaning that whenever the training wheels do come off, the player has a far less likely chance of doing this. What'll you do? Keep using the Light Dash on rings to increase your speed but decrease your control of Sonic, or not do so and increase your control of Sonic, but decrease your amount of speed and leave you at a higher risk of being attacked by other obstacles such as the tornado in Crisis City. It's a really great risk versus reward system and one of the best uses of the Lightspeed Dash in a Sonic game, which is not something I was expecting to say about this one. It was even brought over to P06 when that came out. That's how you know it's good. Still, the Mach Speed sections are only a fraction of the time you'll be using the Light Dash in 06. Meaning that it's still unfortunately the weakest version of it in the series so far, and judging by the next game we're taking a look at, it'll probably stay that way. Here we go, the game that inspired me to make this video. As is tradition at this point, the Lightspeed Dash is an upgrade for Sonic and Unleashed. It's found in the entrance stage of Shamar and is required to get to the entrance of the country's day stage, Arid Sands. It functions almost the exact same way it has ever since SA2, the only difference being that it's finally been mapped to its own separate button, probably since having both the boost and Lightspeed Dash mapped to the same button would have been a massive pain. So, kudos to Sonic Team for finally doing that. If only they did the same thing with the homing attack. The Lightspeed Dash is a lot less prominent in Unleashed compared to previous games, mainly being used for aerial shortcuts the air boost just can't quite make. The reason this is, if I were to guess, is that the boost gameplay kinda takes away the usefulness of the Lightspeed Dash. It's not really useful for collecting a bunch of rings at once, not only because rings are in bulk in this game, but also because the boost has a magnetic effect that attracts any nearby rings, and due to the increased speed of the boost games, it's not very useful for giving Sonic a quick speed boost like it was in previous games. If anything, it slows Sonic down. shortcuts are really the only thing that it's useful for. The Lightspeed Dash also appears in the Wii and PS2 ports of Unleashed. The Lightspeed Dash is mapped to the same button as Boost, which isn't as much of an issue as you'd think if you know how boosting works in Unleashed. It's also unlocked from the beginning of the game, which is cool, but sadly, the Light Dash is even more irrelevant in Unleashed. I can't think of a single time it is used. Still though, both versions are very functional, and it being mapped to its own separate button makes this the best version of the Lightspeed Dash we've seen so far. But it does kinda suck that it's barely used in the game due to the boost. Oh yeah, and it can also collect the brand new 10 rings introduced in Unleashed. Thought I'd mention that before we move on. Okay, here we are. The good shit. Sonic Unleashed might have been the game that gave me this video idea, but Colors is what made me want to make it. So far, there have been plenty of minor changes to the Lightspeed Dash after SA2, but has stayed pretty consistent overall. Not anymore though, because with the 2010s, the Lightspeed Dash would radically change with every mainline Sonic game released that decade. Except for Mania, of course, since it's a 2D game and a sequel to the classics on Genesis. Starting with Colors, it is the first game in the mainline series where Sonic cannot use the Lightspeed Dash, not as part of his normal moveset or even as an upgrade. Instead, the ability can only be used by the game's Hover Wisp, which the player unlocks in the game's third zone, Starlight Carnival. When activated, the player can press the jump button to make hover, and if they press the boost button near a trail of rings, they can use the Lightspeed Dash to collect them. This is actually the first iteration of the Light Dash that can collect clusters of rings closely grouped together, compared to previous games, where using the Light Dash on any formation of rings that wasn't a straight line could be kinda unreliable. There are some times when pressing the boost button near a trail of rings won't do anything, but for the most part, the Lightspeed Dash in Sonic Colors is pretty solid. You can criticize the game for taking this ability that normal Sonic could do and locking it behind a power-up, which I can somewhat understand. I think the more platforming-focused stages of Colors could have been made a lot more interesting with a move like the Lightspeed Dash being a part of Sonic's normal moveset, but I personally don't mind. Hover is used way more frequently in Colors than the Light Dash was in Unleashed, and outside of Heroes and Shadow 05, it's always been some sort of upgrade for both Sonic and Shadow to unlock. So the Lightspeed Dash being locked behind this one power-up isn't that crazy to me. And if you're truly that upset Sonic Team would make a change like this, well, you're in luck. Because the next Sonic game would return to using the traditional Lightspeed Dash. Kinda. Generations is the first game since Shadow the Hedgehog where the Lightspeed Dash is unlocked from the beginning of the game, although the player can't use it from the start? Okay, let me explain. The Lightspeed Dash in Generations works a lot like the one in Unleashed, although instead of being able to use it on any group of rings you can find, they can only be used on specific rings with this glowing aura around them. The Lightspeed Dash is predominantly used in Speed Highway for progression and shortcuts, which is pretty fitting since Speed Highway is from Sonic Adventure, the game that introduced the Lightspeed Dash to the franchise, although there are a few more times it appears in the game outside of the stage. The Lightspeed Dash was only really used for shortcuts in Unleashed, so I don't mind that you're only able to use it on certain rings, but I can definitely understand the argument against this change. Sure, the boost makes the Light Dash almost completely useless, but it's at least nice to have the option to do it whenever you want, especially since the Lightspeed Dash is only really mandatory in one level. And on the topic of Sonic games that only use the Lightspeed Dash in one level, yes, there are more than one. We have the next game we're looking at. So like I said when covering Unleashed and Generations, the boost gameplay kinda made the Lightspeed Dash useless outside of taking shortcuts. But with Lost World returning to a more slower pace and platforming focused gameplay formula, it would only make sense to have the Lightspeed Dash as one of Sonic's abilities. I mean, the whole gimmick of Lost World was all these crazy moves you could perform as him. But knowing Sonic Team from this time period, they didn't do that. Instead, we return back to how the Light Dash worked in Sonic Colors, with the move being locked behind the Hover Wisp, which would be fine if it wasn't in only one level, Lava Mountain Zone 3, the level right before the final boss. It appears on an alternate path the player can use to skip over what many people consider to be the best platforming in the game. I was originally going to say that it was at least kinda cool that Lost World finally allows you to play as Hover in 3D, since he was only used in Colors 2D sections, but then I remembered that you can play as Hover in 3D in Colors, so I can't even give it that. This feels like something that was added very late in development, like little kids who playtested the game were having trouble with this section, so last second, Sonic Team added the Hover Wisp right here to make things easier for them. I'm not going to call it the worst Lightspeed Dash or something crazy like that, but it's definitely the most disappointing. Instead of creating interesting platforming challenges with it, Sonic Team decided to use the Light Dash as a way to hold the player's hand. Moving on. Forces is the first, and so far, only mainline 3D Sonic game, unless you count the Storybook series as mainline, which I personally do, where Sonic can't perform the Lightspeed Dash at all, not even by collecting the Hover Wisp, although Shadow does have a move very similar to it in Episode Shadow. You see, there will be certain parts in the level where a bunch of enemies are in the air forming a chain between one another, and if Shadow uses the homing attack on them, he'll glide across them in a similar manner to the Lightspeed Dash. I don't know if this has an official name or not, so welcome back Lightspeed Attack. Instead, the Lightspeed Dash can only be used by the player's avatar character, specifically when they're equipped with, you guessed it, the Lightning Wispin. The Lightning Wispin gives the player this electric whip that they can use to destroy a bunch of enemies at once, but by collecting a Lightning Wisp, the player is able to temporarily perform the Lightspeed Dash, and it is lame. After completing the avatar's first stage, the player can have almost any Wispin equipped, meaning that anytime the Light Dash appears, it is completely optional and only serves as a skip level button. Sure, you could perform skips and shortcuts with the Light Dash in previous Sonic games, but they usually required some level of skill and had actual consequences for failing. In Forces though, you just press and hold the Y button and fly over a massive chunk of the level. Which isn't very good, because Forces levels are pretty damn short as is. Once again, I wouldn't call it the worst Lightspeed Dash, that title still belongs to these two games. But at least 06's level design actually used it in interesting ways, and SA1's gave Sonic these pretty cool shoes. For the first time since Sonic Unleashed, the Lightspeed Dash can now be performed on any rings, anytime. It's even unlocked from the start of the game, which is nice and not something I was expecting when I played Frontiers for the first time. Not only because it's been an upgrade or power-up for most of its life, but also since this game literally has a skill tree you can use to unlock moves. It's once again min-mapped to a new button, requiring the player to click the left analog stick to perform it, which is actually my preferred way to use the Light Dash. You are always using it after running into a trail of rings, so mapping it to the same stick that you would use to move Sonic is a really smart idea. However, the second and much larger change would be that, unless we're counting the Lightspeed Attack, which we probably shouldn't since it's considered its own separate thing, this is the first time the Lightspeed Dash has been able to collect items that aren't rings. It can collect XP dropped by enemies, memory tokens, portal gears, red seeds of power, blue seeds of defense, and even the red star rings in cyberspace. And due to Sonic being a lot slower in Frontiers compared to the Boost games, he's basically just Adventure Sonic with a run button, the Lightspeed Dash gets to be used a lot more often. Not as much as the early 3D Sonic games, but it's still the most the Light Dash has been used in a Sonic game since... damn, I want to say Colors. There is one small issue with Frontiers Light Dash though, and that's its physics in cyberspace. You see, cyberspace has physics that, while pretty similar to the open zone, are not exactly one-to-one, leading to the cyberspace stages having their own odd little quirks when compared to the open zone. One of those is the light dash, which when used in cyberspace makes Sonic come to a complete stop. It's pretty annoying, not only due to how much cyberspace relies on time attack, so having a move that stops you in place for a moment kinda ruins the fun of speedrunning Frontiers' levels, but also because the light dash in the open zone doesn't do this at all. Or any other Sonic game with the lightspeed dash. But even with that, admittedly, very small issue, the lightspeed dash in Frontiers is great, and without a doubt the best version of it in the entire franchise. And I can't think of a better way to end this video than here. What do you mean there's still 2 more games left to cover? Since Dream Team was made with mobile devices in mind, there were a few things about the 3D Sonic gameplay that had to be simplified. One of those being the lightspeed dash. It works pretty similarly to how it did in Generations. You can only use it on certain groups of rings. There isn't very much to talk about here. The only thing of note about Dream Team's light dash is that since she is the only other speed character in the game, at least at launch, I haven't played the Shadow update, Amy can use the lightspeed dash for the first time in the series. I guess we can add that to the list. Remember how I said that Shadow can homing attack across chains of enemies and forces? Well, as a tribute to that, Act 2 of Sunset Heights and Shadow Generations has a bunch of enemy chains where you can do the exact same thing. That's it. He can't actually do the lightspeed dash in Shadow Generations. I guess the timeline reset at the end of 06 must have made him forget how to do it. And there we have it. The complete history of the lightspeed dash. I wasn't joking earlier, it has changed with almost every game it's ever been in. And I feel like the constant changes made to the lightspeed dash make it the perfect analogy for the Sonic franchise as a whole. It's always changing. Sometimes those changes are big and can be noticed right away, and sometimes they're more subtle and only really noticeable when taking a step back. Sometimes these massive changes pay off and are well liked by fans, and sometimes they aren't and people absolutely hate them. I guess this has been one long and kind of pretentious way of saying, holy shit, I need to get a job.